Good morning. I'm Ben Ayers, Dean of the Terry College of Business at the University of Georgia, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our Terry Third Thursday. This is a great monthly event that we have each third Thursday of the month. It's a great opportunity for alumni, other business leaders, and some of our students to network. I want to take this opportunity to thank our alumni board for organizing today's event. I also would like to recognize our sponsors, our corporate sponsor, the Bank of North Georgia, as well as our two media sponsors, Atlanta Journal-Constitution and Atlanta Public Broadcasting, WABE. So please join me in thanking them as well. For upcoming events, we will not have a Terry Third Thursday in December, as is our custom, but we will return back in January. Also, on December 14th, I will kick off our 35th annual Georgia Economic Outlook. That will be held at the Marriott Marquis in Atlanta. Dennis Lockhart will deliver the national forecast for 2018, and then I also will provide the state forecast for 2018. It will be a great event. Some of you may have heard Dennis speak here earlier in the spring. He will do a fantastic job, and I will do the best that I can. He will be a tough act to follow. In January and February, I'll be touring the state, providing more localized forecasts across major cities in the state. As many of you know, as part of my responsibilities and opportunity as Dean of the Terry College, I get to teach a leadership class named the Deer Run Fellows Program. It's a highly selective program. We select 8 students per semester to go through a class with me. We spend a weekend down in South Georgia at Deer Run Plantation with Doug Ivester and other executives, and it's a fantastic program. Today we actually have 2 of our students with us, and I wanted to point them out. Taylor Lemaire. Taylor will be graduating this spring with an accounting degree and will be pursuing her MAC degree after that. And then also Helen Woodland. Helen will be graduating this spring as well with a degree in finance and international business. These are 2 fantastic students and will soon be alumni. I encourage you to take a chance to talk with them after today's presentation. They will be leaders in the business community soon. So thank you for joining us today. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Frank Blake. Frank served as chairman and CEO of Atlanta's own Home Depot from 2007 to 2014. Prior to that, he held the title of Executive Vice President of Business Development and Corporate Relations. Before his time at the Home Depot, he served as Deputy Secretary for the U.S. Department of Energy and worked in a variety of executive roles for General Electric. He has also garnered a rather impressive range of public sector experience, including working for the Environmental Protection Agency, serving as Deputy Counsel to Vice President George H.W. Bush, as well as a law clerk to Justice John Paul Stevens of the United States Supreme Court. Frank sits on many boards, currently Georgia Aquarium, Procter & Gamble, Agnes State College, Macy's. He also serves as chairman of the boards of Delta and Grady Hospital. Frank holds a BA from Harvard and a law degree from Columbia. Please join me in welcoming Frank Blake.
Thank you, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for being here this morning. Thanks particularly, there are current and former Home Depot associates in the audience, and so thank you for being here, and I apologize if I tell you things that you say, God, I wish I had known that then. It would have made more sense what was going on. And for the rest of you, this will give you some hope that anybody could end up as a CEO. What I'd like to do this morning is give you a little bit of background on Home Depot and the situation that existed prior to my becoming CEO. I'm going to assume, though, for the most part, you all know Home Depot intimately. You're there every waking moment when you're not here. And then give you some of my own reflections on what I learned, particularly around leadership from my time at Depot. So we'll start, if I can, this works. All right, well, I can do it without charts, but at some point we'll have charts. So the non-chart version of this is Home Depot. You know Home Depot. It's got over 2,000 stores. It's in Canada, Mexico, the United States, #1 home improvement retailer in the world. With any luck, the current team now at Home Depot is going to get this company to $100 billion worth of sales by the end of this year. And it's a relatively new company. It will be celebrating its 40th anniversary next year. So this is, in the context of retail and in companies around the country, a very young company. I have a chart that would show the growth in stores and sales. One of the interesting things about Home Depot, not going to get fixed. One of the interesting things is when it was founded by Bernie Marcus and Arthur Blank and Ken Langone, great story around the founding, by the way. The book's out of print now, but get a hold of a copy of Built from Scratch, which is Bernie and Arthur's story of building Home Depot. They'd been fired from a prior home improvement store, and then they went out to build Home Depot. The company was the fastest in the history of the United States to 10 billion, 20 billion, 30 billion, 40 billion, just on a rocket ship of growth through, there we go, through year after year after year. All right, there you go. All right, we're back in business. Okay, I told you that. I told you this. Now, in 2000, as the company has gone through years and years of rapid growth, they decide they need to bring in professional management. And they looked to Bob Nardelli, who had just gone through the selection process of GE's successor to Jack Welch. I'll have some other comments around GE, but they went and got Bob. Jeff Immelt obviously became the CEO, and they hired Bob as the CEO of Home Depot to bring in kind of more management professionalism for the company, which Bob did. That's a longer story on what Bob accomplished and didn't accomplish at Home Depot. But after a fairly strong start, things got rocky, and the culture clash between Home Depot and GE is probably worth its own book. But the result ended up in December of 2006, January 2007, that the board and Bob parted ways. I'll pause there, hold this chart for a second, because this is the personal comments around that. I was brought into Home Depot by Bob. I had worked for Bob at GE. I spent 10 years at GE, actually 11 years at GE. I'm a lawyer by training, as you could tell from Ben's introduction. I started out doing a very typical Washington, D.C. practice, in and out of government and private practice. Actually, 12 of us, we started our own law firm. And by 1989, the firm, which we started with 12, was over 200 lawyers. Very successful, and for reasons I'm still not sure I can fully describe, I left to go to join GE as a lawyer in the power systems business in Schenectady, New York, which when you said that to Washington people, you're leaving Washington, D.C., and you're moving to Schenectady, New York, that was like, you are the stupidest human being on the face of the earth. So I go to GE as a lawyer, and I am the beneficiary of a unique HR practice, maybe not unique, but a HR practice that GE had at the time, right? Very large conglomerate. They'd cycle through business leaders basically every 18 months. You'd get new business leaders. They never bothered cycling the lawyers because who cares about the lawyers? So I'm in place year after year after year. And after about the 5th year, I'm the only one around the table who actually understands the business. And so people start asking me, what do you think, what do you think? And I can give them my opinion on what they ought to be doing. And as a result of that, transitioned onto the business side. Became in charge of strategic planning, M&A activity, licensing, those business-related activities in the power business. ultimately ended up doing that for Jack Welch, direct report to Jack, doing all the M&A activity for GE. When Jack left GE, I took that opportunity to leave as well, and that's when I was at the Department of Energy at the very start of George Bush's son. I had worked for George Bush's dad as well. So I go to Home Depot, and I'm doing the same activity effectively that I did at GE. I'm buying companies. There's a company down the road, HD Supply, that was the result of all those acquisitions. We built up the country's largest commercial and industrial distribution business, calling it, at the time, Home Depot Supply. When the events with Bob and the board were unfolding, I got a call from the board at the end of December 2006 saying that the board and Bob were parting ways, and the board wanted me to be the CEO of Home Depot. I said, that's not a good idea. You ought to think about that. You need to hire someone with retail experience. Home Depot at the time, the #3 retailer in the country. You ought to have a retailer. I'm not a retailer. I've been buying companies. Think about it for a day. So they said, fine, we'll think about it for a day. I said, I will think about it for a day. They nonetheless came back and said, yep, we want you to be the CEO. And I said, okay. It's hard. It's hard to really explain in retrospect why they offered me the job. I will tell you in complete truth that there wasn't a moment prior to that that I ever thought about being the CEO of the Home Depot. Never occurred to me. Not even in the dark of night, you're driving along, hey, I'd tell you what I'd do if I were running this place. Never occurred to me. So you need to keep that a little bit as the background for this discussion, because as a result of that, I actually thought more intensely about leadership and what it means, frankly, because I hadn't thought about it before, so I had to make up time. In addition to that, my own personal backdrop on this, and Home Depot at the time, as the people who were here, who were there at Home Depot, was going through its own internal crisis of trying to resolve this GE culture versus Home Depot culture and what was happening, and we were losing share to our main competitor, Lowe's, and there was a lot of morale issues. On top of all of that, the housing market was just about to collapse. So this was a chart I used consistently for 8 years in every analyst meeting we had, which looks at private residential investment as a percent of GDP. And that's taking new home sales, remodel sales, agency fees, all kinds of stuff. It's bundled together. Then you look at it as a percent of GDP to kind of go, where are you? And the great thing about data sets is this has been collected since the 40s, so you have a pretty good idea of what it looks like and what the mean looks like. In the back half of 2006, it hit its high, and it was just about to go down. As you can see, the average a little over 4%. And remember, you know, GDP at the time, you trillions of dollars, so little percents is a lot of money. It dropped dramatically. So this was, you know, we thought, as I would do this at each investor conference, I thought, well, for sure, we've hit the bottom now. We've hit the bottom now. No, we kept going. The prior 60-year low had been around 3%, and as you can see, excuse me, it got as low as 2.2%. So what to do? Housing crisis, a lot of you know, drama within the company, new CEO, and by the way, and this can be attested with people here, no one knew who the hell I was. So they said, Bob Nardelli is gone, Frank Blake is your new CEO. Everybody goes, Frank who? And then when they find out, the two things they find out was I was at GE. All right, well, that's not reassuring because that's where Bob was from. And I'm a lawyer by training, and I can tell you that that was singularly unreassuring. The first thing, my first view was that we needed to sell all of the businesses that I'd been buying over the last 5 years. So you can use your imagination to paint the picture of my very first board meeting coming in and saying, you know, all those pitches that you've been agreeing to over the last 5 years, time to sell. That was a contentious and interesting meeting, but we decided to spin off, not spin off, to sell HD Supply. That too had its drama because we were selling it right as the banking crisis was starting to hit. I won't go through all the details of that, but we had to take several billions of dollars price off the initial selling agreement. We had to guarantee debt to get rid of it. We also stopped building new stores. We shut Expo. For those of you who remember the old Expo store, Home Depot at the time, in a search for growth, we had every new format you could imagine. We had small hardware stores, we had landscape supply stores, we had lighting stores, flooring stores, we had a bank, we had everything you can imagine, and I shut it all. More importantly, we stopped building new stores. So if you think about the business model of Depot, the business model of Home Depot was we built roughly 200 new stores a year. That's what generated sales growth for the next year. That's where we allocated our capital. I decided we already had too many stores. Now again, this is, you know, several years ago. They could probably use some stores now. But my favorite example of this, and I knew this because I was also overseeing real estate. How many of you have been in Moultrie, Georgia? All right, brilliant. How many of you think Moultrie, Georgia can support a home improvement store? Well, right? I mean, Moultrie is not where you think of, boy, this is where I'm going to plop down a 100,000 square foot home improvement store. If the next time you visit Moultrie, Georgia, you may notice that there's not only a Home Depot, but 100 yards away, there is a Lowe's in Moultrie, Georgia. That was a sign of how frenetic the real estate development was around home improvement. I'm a little proud of this because we were ahead of everybody else. We not only stopped building new stores, we took a $500 million write-off to entirely clean out the pipeline of new stores. So it was a dead stop. This is sort of a framework that we use for our strategy. I think the company is still using that. For those of you who've read Jim Collins' Good to Great, I take no personal pride in this. This is his, every company needs to answer 3 questions. What are you passionate about? What do you want to be best in the world at? And what drives your economic engine? 3 great questions. We've used this to structure our strategy. I believe the company still uses it. The most important one, and I think just for all of you as you think about business, the most important one is actually what drives your economic engine. And the big change at Home Depot from my period of time was changing that answer. So previously it had been building new stores. It then became around how do we make the existing stores more productive and invest in the existing stores. I won't bore you all with all the strategic details of that, but I think it was a hugely important pivot for the company. This is what I'm going to spend most of my time talking about. So I take you back now to January 2007. I am the new CEO of the Home Depot. At the time, the company had 350,000 associates. Now it's well over 400,000. And we have an internal TV system. If you go into the break room, if you ever wonder what happens in the break rooms in big retailers, we pipe in, you know, TV shows that they try to figure out how to turn off, and then we try to figure out how to turn them back on. But the second day after becoming CEO, I had to address 350,000 associates over our internal TV. Again, not having given a thought on what to say wasn't anything that I was prepared for. So I was very fortunate that my son actually worked at Home Depot. He was a returning Iraqi war vet, and the company had a program where you could start off in stores and work your way up. He had started as an assistant store manager and was at that point a store manager. So I called him and I said, Frank, same name. I said, Frank, I'm the new CEO of Home Depot. And after he expressed shock and just said, well, good luck, Dad, I said, do you have any advice on what people would want to hear? What would store associates want to hear from the new CEO? And he said, well, I really don't know. But I can tell you how I start each of my store meetings every week. And I said, great, how do you start it? He said, I read from Built from Scratch. So I take Bernie and Arthur's book and I find a chapter or a page and I read from the book. And I go, brilliant, for lots of reasons, in terms of reconnecting with the past, you know, ready-made content. I said, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to read from Built from Scratch. Madly flipped through the book to find something appropriate and find this chart on the inverted pyramid. First, appealing because it's visual. Second, appealing, you know, CEOs on the bottom. Don't blame me if things go wrong. You know, so I thought, this is great. This is what I'm going to start talking about. And I did. And for the next 8 years, I would say for me, this was my dominant thought process of how do you actually do this. So at one level, you look at this chart and you say, okay, that's very nice, humble, CEOs on the bottom, servant leadership, got it, move on. I would say actually it is one of the most profound business concepts in existence, and I'm going to explain why. First, and this one I can go on quite a while about, I'll try to keep it brief, but the first thing you see is, and I believe this is true for every single leadership position, you ought to look at it from this perspective. The first thing is, you know, is that that job, whatever it is, whatever the leader's job is a weight-bearing position. The organization's weight is on you. When you think about integrity and the importance of integrity, you understand that if you don't have it, if your loyalties are conflicted, if you're doing things for your own self-good rather than for the good of the organization, it fractures. Integrity is the most important thing to start with in an inverted pyramid world. The second thing you notice is it's all uphill. So it's work. Everything that's important that's going on is up above you, not below you. I believe that that's actually the right understanding of businesses at large. Whenever anyone says that something cascades down within an organization, I write a memo and it cascades down, the answer is, well, no, actually it doesn't, because no one gives a what you say. I mean, to be really honest, it's you say it and maybe it gets to the next level, but by the second or third level, if you've got an organization that's above 6 people, everybody's going, well, that's fascinating what the boss thinks, but you know, it's probably not right anyways. So you need to work to get whatever it is that you care about up through the organization. The third thing that you realize is, who do you want around you? And when you think of moving something from that ungainly perspective, the first thing you realize is you want multipliers. You want people whose energy multiplies through the organization. Just additive people, never mind negative people, won't take you where you want to go you need force multipliers. Colin Powell has a great expression for this. He says, optimism is a force multiplier. I don't know that you always have to be optimistic, but I know that you have to be looking for force multipliers. You have to be looking for people who radiate out and don't absorb in, and there are an awful lot of people, and you know them when you work with them, that absorb rather than radiate. Absorption doesn't work in this kind of structure. You have to radiate. Then you go on to, all right, everything that's important is happening with your frontline associates and your customers. How do you actually get up there? And on this, the most important learning I got on this, again, early on, and I'll give a plug for a local pastor who I think is one of the great thinkers about leading of anyone in the country, and I've worked with some extraordinary leaders, and that's Andy Stanley. And one of Andy's concepts on how you make vision stick and what that looks like is you do it through communication that is portable. So whatever it is that you're communicating, people have to be able to understand, internalize it for their own, and pass it forward. And second, you do that through celebration. And that, in fact, celebration is one of the most direct ways of expressing whatever it is that you're actually looking for in your organization. We say things, but when you actually pull someone up and you celebrate him or her for what they do and you make it concrete on what they do, you're actually providing a better example for an organization of what you want to do than any other thing you'll do as a leader. I'll tell you how I internalize that, but I believe it is a very, very deep truth. Every business person knows the adage that you get what you measure. I would add to that or supplement that by saying you get what you celebrate. Most interesting thing to me in going into companies, and now I see a lot more as I'm on other boards, is asking, what do they celebrate? Are they consistent about their celebration? Are they intentional about their celebration? Is there a purpose to their celebration? And how do they do it? For me, we did a lot of things within the company celebrating a particular kind of activity around customer service. We had, I won't go through all the different programs we had, but we had rings, we had badges, we had trips. Personally, I would spend every Sunday afternoon writing notes to our hourly associates, where the store managers would say, here's what someone got, but I said, it's important to me. And I would give you a point of view about handwritten notes. And this comes from having worked with two phenomenal leaders who did this. The first was George Bush Dad. So I worked for George Bush Dad when he was vice president. And I saw, the great thing about working for a vice president is no one cares. So you're on no one cares. You're on a staff of 20 people, and you get to see what the man actually does. And George Bush Dad would come into the office every morning, and remember, this is 1981, so he's working on a typewriter, not a computer. But he sits down and he types notes. And you'd know it was his typewriting because the E wouldn't quite line up, and there'd be white out and all the rest of that stuff. But as a staff person, when you got a note from the vice president, that was a big deal. Years later, I'm selling a power plant project in Indonesia for GE, and the Minister of Energy comes up and says, you're going to win this bid. And I said, yes, I know. We've got the best equipment, the best price, blah, blah. He said, no, that's all true, but you're going to win it because I saw you work for George Bush, and he's my hero. And when I was the deputy assistant to the nothing in the UN, I was getting notes from George Bush. I would do anything for that man. Remember that. Remember that there's a power in notes. When I was at GE, I would get handwritten notes from Jack. Not all of them friendly, but I would get handwritten notes from Jack. That would make an impression. At Depot, when I started this, I kind of wondered, is this a meaningful thing or not? And in the first or second month, I'm walking in one of the stores, and the associate An associate said, I got a note from you. And I said, oh, great, thank you. And he said, would you mind sending me another note exactly the same? And I said, yeah, okay, no problem. Why? And he said, well, because I was convinced, and all my friends were all convinced that this was RoboPenned. You couldn't possibly have written it. So we put it under water, and it leaked, and we ruined it, so would you mind writing me another? So a lesson from that is take the time, thank people, write notes, and in my mind, as part of moving up through the inverted pyramid, I made the notes as specific as I could because it was, what are we celebrating? What is it that you did? It wasn't just great service, thank you, you're wonderful, Frank. It was, you did X, thank you. Again, the Home Depot associates will recognize this. We did, I think this is the next slide, every week we did a video of associates who did great customer service, and we broadcast that in the same TV in the break rooms that everybody tried to knock out.
Well, the story is really pretty simple. Jeremy came in one day looking to get some help to build a soapbox car that he wanted to be involved in a race in Franklin, New Hampshire.
I was working in my department, 2122, building materials and lumber, and the young kid walked up to me and he said, hey, I need help in building a soapbox car.
Rakeem really didn't know what to do, so we asked him a few questions. It turned out we went from measuring to building, got Mike Noel involved, and they came to me and said, Carmen, would you mind if we helped him out? And I said, why don't we just do the whole thing with him?
I really didn't know how to build a soapbox car. I've built furniture in the past. You name it, I've pretty much attempted it. It was kind of on the fly.
We just did the cuts. He helped us paint it, and we built a great relationship with him. And it took a couple of weeks, maybe 2-3 weeks, but we got it done.
Oh my God, I was so proud of it. It was so much fun to watch it grow, and just seeing the things that they did with it and putting the numbers on it. We have our store number in the back, the names, and having Jeremy sign it. It was just a labor of love for them. But I think the best thing is just to see Jeremy smile every time he looks at it.
I went on my day off to watch the race. I was there from beginning to end. We delivered the car in a Home Depot truck. He had a smile, I had a smile. His mother was happy. The newspaper was there at the time. There was no feeling better than in the world. His first race, he came in first, so his smile was pretty big. Second race, came in first again. And his fifth race, he won, and he still wanted to keep going. It was just amazing.
There isn't many retailers that you can go to, I can't think of any, where you can just say yes to someone with a big smile like Jeremy. He's an 11-year-old boy with Asperger's who had a dream, and he met two guys and he got to do it. And we were able to just say yes. Mike Noel and Rakeem Parker are Home Depot legends.
All right, so we would do that every week, 52 weeks a year. We actually had a little book that would be a compendium of all these stories out of the belief that celebration and specific celebration is actually how you move an organization with an inverted pyramid. I give a final comment. One other video that's just my favorite video is Bernie Marcus made a great comment to me. He made many great comments over the course of my time as CEO. But one of the first things he said was, remember that you have a prominent job but not a significant job. You have a prominent job because you're the person who gets to appear before investors and analysts and all that stuff. But the only significant jobs in the company are the people who actually interact with associates. I think that is a great truth. I think it's a great truth for any leader, that it's the people on your team who have the significant jobs, and your job is to make their job easier and better, to connect better with the customer. And the final comment is just remember to always say thank you. And this video is particularly relevant now for Home Depot given all the hurricanes, but you'll see a reference so you'll be able to date it from several years ago. But it was an internal, what we called an internal ad to our associates. We were really proud of the fact that it got hundreds of thousands of hits on YouTube, and we didn't do a lot to propagate it. But it was a great expression of a thank you.
This is my dad. And show the camera that.
My daddy.
And what does your dad do?
My dad helps people build stuff and fix stuff.
My dad makes stuff out of wood.
Goes out and helps the community. Builds houses of people from the war. Que ayuda a las personas. He fixes stuff. He's the boss.
He'll see someone walking in and he'll probably hold the door open for them.
He volunteers to make children's playgrounds that don't have them.
He brings out the good in me.
And he's usually always smiling.
Tell me about your mom. What's so special about your mom?
She likes to help people. She tells people good job, what they're doing. She helped the veterans. She works really hard.
I love my mom. In Joplin, a big storm happened. My grandma helps people after the tornado.
Hurricane Sandy hit the East Coast.
It blew away houses and knocked down trees.
My dad started helping people. Helps them get their house back together. They put it on top of the houses. You hammer things, bam, 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 to make it look pretty.
So where does your mom work at?
Works at a big orange place. A big orange and white building. My mom works in the front. The garden center.
In plumbing, my mom and dad both work at Home Depot.
Home Depot. She works at the Home Depot. Do you work at the Home Depot? Yes.
My dad's a good man.
I don't know what my life would be like without him.
And he's my favorite hero.
This heart's for my dad.
I'm proud of you, Dad. I'm proud of my mom. I'm proud of my dad. I'm proud of my parents. Estoy orgullosa de mi papá. I'm proud of my mom.
I'm proud of what my dad does. I'm proud of my mom and dad.
We take care of our customers. We take care of each other. We roll up our sleeves and help every chance we get. Thanks. Okay, so shameless use of little children to deliver a message, but it works. I'll leave you with one other thought, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So in 2007, I became the CEO of the Home Depot. As I mentioned, I worked for GE, and I was actually a direct report to Jack Welch. And one of the early calls I made was to Jack, and I said, Jack, would you spend a day with me and kind of give me your version of CEO 101? And he was very gracious and agreed to do that. And I had done hundreds of pitches with Jack. I mean, hundreds of pitches. And I prepped so damn hard for this pitch. I can't tell you. I knew the margin rate of an ant trap. I was just so into the weeds on the numbers because I thought that's what he would be asking about. And instead, we sat down, and the first question he said was, draw your organization chart for me and take me through your people. And I had heard how important people were, you know, from a CEO perspective, but frankly, it wasn't obvious to me from my perspective at GE, and it was such an interesting exercise going through that with Jack. And since then, whenever I talk, and I get the opportunity, it's a lot of fun, I get to talk to new CEOs and leaders, and I tell them, I already know, and I will bet you $100 that I will give you the answer to the question of what's your biggest regret. I know the answer. And the answer will always be, you move too slowly on people. It will always be that. And so I offer that to all of you because it is a deep truth. It's the hardest thing leaders do, is actually make decisions on wonderful people who aren't the right people for the next 5 to 10 years. So that's my $100 bet for all of you. You can cash it or pay me anytime you want to take on the bet. Then the second thing is, so 8 years later, it's now my last time that I'm asking Jack for this. We did it every single year. And so I get to ask the question that I never would have asked in any of the other meetings because he'd just look at me and dismiss me out of hand. I said, all right, Jack, what is the #1 attribute of a leader? If you said, boil it all down, what's the single most important thing for a leader? And his answer was such a shock to me. And then he explained it, because my face registered shock. He said, generosity. Wasn't obvious to me as someone who worked for him that that would be the answer, but he explained it, and it was, because he said, you need to be fueled by the success of those around you. The great leaders are people who love to see the people around them succeed and who draw energy, passion, and motivation from that. Great answer. I leave that with all of you. And thank you very much for the opportunity to come here this morning and talk with you and open it up to any questions or comments you might have. Thank you.
Frank, having worked in federal government and in private enterprise, you know that the basis of the upcoming tax cut from 35 to 20% is that the companies are going to pass those savings on in R&D and wage increases and so forth. Do you believe in the premise of the trickle down, and do you think this is going to pay off the $1.5 trillion in debt that it's going to incur?
So yes and yes. I think, now, first, Home Depot is not a very international business. Canada, Mexico, less than 15% of the business. But I worked at GE for a decade. GE is a very international business. And I can tell you the corporate tax rate structure for the United States is counterproductive and results in a lot of cash parked overseas and results in a lot of inefficiencies. So lowering the corporate tax rate, I think, is a great idea. The second, of what companies will do, I'm a deep believer in the forces of competition. I think what you're seeing now in retail is an interesting expression of that. What used to be the profit pools in retail are shrinking, not so much, I mean, not in Home Depot, but other parts of retail, those profit pools are shrinking. I don't see that stopping, so I think a better tax rate, I'm speaking now purely from a retailer's perspective. You look at who pays the 36 to 37%. I could go on a bender on this one, sorry. You look at who pays the 36 to 37% tax rate, it's retailers in the United States. You look at who employs people, it's retailers in the United States. Amazon, God bless them, if you look over the last 10 years, I'm doing this from memory, so my numbers may not be exactly right, but Amazon has paid $8 billion in taxes, give or take. Home Depot over that same period of time has paid close to $30 billion in taxes. You tell me, is that a good answer? I don't think so. So I'm all for lowering the tax rate. I think it will be reinvested for the consumer and the employee's benefit.
During your presentation, you talked about conditions leading up to your becoming CEO, and you talked about a lot of the things you did as CEO. Give us the rest of the story. And I agree, it's a wonderful philosophy to measure what you celebrate, but unfortunately Wall Street doesn't think that way. So how would Wall Street rate your leadership term?
Well, so I didn't put all, have more than doubled the return on invested capital. We outcomped our competitor consistently. One data point that I'm very proud of is the company had a $50 billion market cap in 2007. Over the course of my 8 years, we exited with about $125 billion market cap, and we bought back $50 billion of shares. That's a lot of value creation. The company now, I think, is going to hit $200 billion in market cap. So I think the focus on the core business and I believe the way the company is approaching its customers and its associates has paid great dividends to our shareholders. Interestingly, just the other comment on that is because of all the drama around the Home Depot and my predecessor, I actually had an activist investor on the board for my first 3 years as CEO. And on the principle that you can't expect people to care about taking care of customers if you're not showing them you care about them. I was very proud of the fact that we increased wage rates for our hourly associates in the midst of this horrible housing recession. My #1 advocate of that was my activist shareholder, because he understood the relationship between taking care of your, maybe not #1, but a strong advocate of supporting that was my activist shareholder. So Wall Street can get it if you are very clear in how the dots connect, and obviously if you deliver.
Frank, thank you for your time this morning. We appreciate it. My question is not quite as deep, but I think equally as important. What are you reading right now, and what book would you recommend to anyone?
Excuse me? What book would I recommend?
Which book are you what are you reading now?
All right. So, I just finished reading a book about the American Revolution called The Glorious Cause. I don't recommend it. I'm just sort of stubborn, so I keep plowing through it. But if you want to learn more details, then for me it was a little dense. There's a book that I'm going to be talking about actually tomorrow in Las Vegas on a panel. That's a really interesting book that I read in this past year. Like the author a lot, very thoughtful author, and it's called Living Forward. And the concept of the book, and it was given to me by, so the Whole Foods, sorry, this is such a meandering answer. The guy who was Whole Foods co-CEO is a guy named Walter Robb. There was another co-CEO who's ended up as the CEO when they got bought by Amazon, interesting guy, Mackey. But this guy, Walter Robb, became a great friend of mine while I was at Depot, and he sent me this book and said, you need to think about this and read it. And it was so new agey that I, frankly, if the guy hadn't been a great friend, I would have just said, fascinating, and thrown it away. But it's actually a very interesting book about how you plan your life and how you think about accounts and what accounts you invest in and what accounts you draw from in your life. So that's interesting, and I'll see if I can interest people tomorrow morning in it. But Walter Robb also taught me a really interesting lesson that I think is a great leadership lesson. In my first year as CEO of Depot, I get this call from the Whole Foods CEO saying, I want to come in and have lunch. All right, great. And the guy, I love Walter. He's a wonderful person, but he's true to the image, right? Sandals, blue jeans, granola coming out of his ears, and not really a hammer and drill bit kind of guy. And after the lunch, I go, just out of curiosity, why are we having lunch? Why are you here? And he said, I make it a habit of whenever I'm in town visiting a store, I give a call to somebody and set up a lunch. And I thought that that was such a great spirit of curiosity and learning from others in the same space that I did that from then on, and I learned from Walter about that. But those are the two books.
Frank, I'll give you a choice of 2 questions, either one that you want. So,
I get a choice?
You get a choice.
Oh, that's a first.
Either.
All right, and I could come up with my own.
And you, knowing you, yes, you could. So either you talked about being generous. What role did the store associates being generous, Habitat Humanity, doing those kinds of civic things like we saw in the video, what kind of role did that play in Home Depot's success? Or, second option, what are some of the things you and the other corporate leaders do to be ground engaged that you really have the opportunity to listen and hear what's going on with the store associates and the customers?
So I'll link the two of them, which was my own fuel. One of the things, so I'm on this path of trying to learn the business, trying to understand life in Home Depot, not from an M&A perspective. And one of the things they said was I'm going to have dinner with hourly associates. I'm going to try to do it once a week. And I didn't do it once a week, but I'd do at least 30 some odd a year, particularly when I traveled, wherever I was traveling, pull 14 associates together, and we just sit around and talk. And it wasn't business, it was just who are you, how'd you end up at Home Depot, we tell our stories, and it was a blast. The first dinner, I'm there, and you know, to tell the full embarrassment of it. So I'm flying in on the company plane. You know, life is not that stressful. But I'm flying in on a company plane to wherever the hell it was. I'm sitting next to this very nice woman, probably early 50s. And she says, how are you? And I said, fine. And I start complaining about my back, because my back's hurt. And she goes, yeah, you know, I've been having back troubles too. And I said, oh, you know, what are your back troubles? And she said, well, you know, I fractured my spine a few months ago, and it was really hard working in the store in a wheelchair, and moving some of the material around when you're in a wheelchair like lumber is really difficult. And I'm going, oh, geez, you know, my little back pain. And then she goes, and I'm expressing, oh, that's so tough. And then she goes, but that isn't the really hard part. The really hard part was, I've got a developmentally disabled son, and he's now 12 years old, and I have to bathe him every night, and getting him into the bathtub and out of the bathtub when you're in a wheelchair. By the end of this discussion, I just felt like the biggest on the face of the earth with my little back issue. And to understand, so my connection to the generosity thing is, and this may be more a Home Depot thing and a retail thing, but God, there are people who work hard. And working on a concrete floor 8 hours a day, it's hard work. And the spirit and the attitude that people would bring to that was always so impressive for me that that was kind of the fuel and the connectivity. And we would do it, we had lots of different versions of that, but just realize that, you know, people are working very, very hard. And I gotta just share one other story just because it's fun. So I actually was with Bernie and Billy and Ken yesterday, Ken Langone, and we're talking about Home Depot and Home Depot Associates. And Bernie is talking about how one of the things about retail is it gives you basic life skills and how important that is. And one of my other, I have so many favorite conversations from these dinners, but one of them was from a young man who said, you know, what have you learned from Depot? And he said, well, the number one thing I've learned from Depot is to wake up. Because for the first 3 months on the job, I was always late to the job, and I loved the job, but I was always late. And then my store manager sat me down, and she said, I'm going to fire you if you're late one more time. And he said, so I went out, and I bought 5 alarm clocks. I bought an electric alarm clock, I bought a wind-up alarm clock, I bought all these different alarm clocks. I've never been late since. And you think about, I mean, just basic life skills that we take for granted that, you know, it's a great privilege. We were talking at the table about one of the presidents of our stores here started as an assistant cashier and is now president of one of the biggest divisions in Home Depot. So great success stories all the time. Thank you.
Curious if you can comment on your view of the premise work-life balance. What's your advice?
Right. So work-life balance doesn't exist, first, just mentally. And that's why this book, Living Forward, was so interesting to me, because it talked more about accounts and depositing into accounts and withdrawing from accounts. And I think that that's actually a much more useful way to think about it, because you go through periods of time, however you want to define your accounts, you go through periods of time where, just in this book, is it's much more interesting to think about your life as a series of accounts and think about some intentionality about what you're investing into and what you're drawing out of, and how you, on the long term, keep those things in balance. Short term, there is no work-life balance. My answer.
Frank, so, right over here.
Yeah.
Having a background at GE and then being a CEO during a really difficult time, what's your take on what's going on at GE right now, especially with the dividend cut and how the CEO is kind of reacting to kind of repositioning the company at this point in time?
So the first comment, I have lots of comments about GE, but I keep them to myself. The first comment that I'd make, and maybe the only comment that I'd make, is CEOs do two really important things. They allocate capital and they allocate people. And by and large, if you get those two things right, life is good. You get those two things wrong, and it's hard to succeed. I think the issue with GE has been, I don't make any comment on the people side, but clearly the capital allocation was not effective. And there are lots of explanations for that, and there are a lot of reasons for that, but the capital allocation decisions didn't work out. And on the other hand, as you can probably tell, I'm a huge Jack Welch fan. My commentary on Jack is when Jack started at GE in 1980, think about this. When Jack started at GE in 1980, GE and Westinghouse were the same size. Basically in the same businesses, only one was in Connecticut, the other was in Pittsburgh. But otherwise, same. By 2000, when Jack left, GE was the largest market cap company in the world, and Westinghouse was bankrupt. So there are a whole series of decisions in those 20 years that led to that result in one direction and the other direction. So I'm a big believer that Jack did a brilliant job. No comment on the hand that the next generation was dealt, but he did an extraordinary job.
Frank, Rich Casanova with the Pro Business Channel. First, when you get back from Vegas, we'd love to have you stop 3 doors down at our studio for an interview on Georgia Business Radio.
Okay.
But second, what's next for Home Depot? What's next for you? And a second part of that question, would you ever consider being on Undercover Former Boss?
So next for Home Depot is killing it. Home Depot is crushing it. It's a great source of pride. I think the company, as another comment, Home Depot's market cap now exceeds GE's. Who would have ever thunk? And rightly so. Home Depot Tuesday, reported results. Keep in mind, this is nearly a $100 billion company. So when it posts nearly 8% comps, those are big numbers, and the company is doing really well. The Undercover Boss thing was interesting because every time people would come up and say, you got to be on Undercover Boss, this would be so great. My answer to that is, that's a great example of not doing the inverted pyramid, because the way those shows work is they're all about drama. And unless you feel certain that the drama is going to come out favorable to your company, what the hell are you doing? Who cares who you are? It's your business. So whether it's former Undercover Boss or while I was there, I always said no. And as in terms of what's next for me, so I had a theory of the case on retirement that I'd have a third of my time on personal stuff, a third of my time on business stuff, and a third of my time giving back. I'm not quite 3 years into it, and I'm not calling success on that, because you tend to lean into prior patterns, so kind of probably spend too much time on business stuff. Need to lean back.
Part question, one on the personal, if you will, and one on the business side. My wife was one of 9, and her father was a senior executive with GE in the appliance division under Jack's tenure.
Yeah.
And she was one of 9, and 8 of them were born in different states. So I was just wondering if you had a similar kind of experience on the personal side. On the business side, the transformation from B to B to B to C, how did you navigate that?
So I'll take the second one first. because I think actually that was, if you think large about the conflict on cultures between GE and Depot, that was the part that was missed, B2B versus B2C. So my commentary on it has always been, I have no idea whether the people in the factory that bottled this Dasani water were in a good mood or a bad mood when they did it. And unless they leave a thumb in there, I'm not going to know, and it's not going to impact my enjoyment of the product. It's a bottle of water. Retail, Home Depot particularly, it makes an enormous difference. You know, is that associate in front of you having a good day or a bad day? Does that associate in front of you think the company cares about him or her or doesn't care about him or her? And that determines an enormous volume of discretionary spend. So that is the key difference. And that's why, you know, for me, having spent most of my time in B2B, I spent a lot of time with associates and customers trying to understand that interaction. On the personal side, I'm not that large a family. I'm fourth of five, but we did not move around. I moved around in my GE career, but as a kid, we were pretty much steady state. Yeah, yep.
What do you think going into the future is the most important coming application of technology for business?
I'll give a broad answer to that, and what I think is so exciting about the future. There's another wonderful book, I think it's called Inevitable. I think the book is called Inevitable. I think the author is a guy named Kevin Kelly, and he's one of these people, I mean, frankly, I can't tell how much is really insightful versus how much is bullshit, but there seems to be a fairly good quotient of insightful. And one of his comments is, think about the 1890s to 1920s. And that was an age of mechanization. And pretty much everything that could be mechanized was mechanized. So you used to have to go to the pump and get your water, and then it became a mechanical pump. Everything. Mechanization was applied to things that had been hand-powered, which is why agricultural employment in the U.S. went from 70% of employment in the 1900s to where it is now, less than 10. His comment, and it makes a lot of sense, is the next 20 years will be the age of cognification. Everything that can have intelligence applied to it will have intelligence applied to it. And things we'd never think of as being intelligent will have intelligence. So Wes here from Home Depot does lighting. If you had said 10 years ago, are you going to have light bulbs that communicate with you remotely? Now, you know, I truly believe 50 years from now, a ceiling like this will look like a gas lamp lit street. Looks to us now. This will be, oh, isn't that quaint when they used to have little troffers and things that they put lights in, because it will all be embedded LEDs. And that's just one example. It's going to go through everything. I mean, you know, diapers are going to be talking to parents. You laugh, wait. Just wait. The diapers are going to be saying, here, I'm ready to go. Take me off. So that's going to create an enormous amount of value, and I think that's the biggest. And I don't care so much. I mean, artificial intelligence, people get scared about the concept of artificial intelligence and all the rest. It's just think about it as cognification. Just think about it as I'm putting knowledge in formerly stupid, inert products. And I think that's, invest in that for the next 20 years.
Yeah, along that same line, do you think Home Depot can be Amazoned?
Can beat it?
Can be Amazon, duplicated. Amazon could duplicate what Home Depot does.
Can Home Depot duplicate Amazon, or can Amazon?
Can Amazon duplicate Home Depot?
Can Amazon duplicate? No. Yeah. So there's an interesting, and I'm sorry to reference all these random books, but there's an interesting book, and I used to use it all the time in orientations at Home Depot, just to scare our associates. But the book is called Eat People. And the idea of the book is that every winning business model for the next foreseeable future will be the business models with the fewest number of people. And you could get scared about that, or you could say, hell no. The idea is to create great experiences with people, whether it's in stores or in call centers or wherever it is. I believe that that will still win if those experiences are great. And I give this example. I hope it proves right. My daughter, a very good friend of hers, MIT math PhD, and this was several years ago, she was going to go work at Amazon. And I said, what are you going to do? And she said, I'm going to be a buyer at Amazon. I said, oh, fascinating, retail, what are you doing? And she said, I'm doing pet food. And I said, wow, that's fascinating. Lisa, I didn't even know you owned a pet. And she said, I don't own a pet and I don't like animals. But I know math and I know algorithms. And that's a theory. So one theory is, hey, I can discover everything through math and algorithms and win. Another theory is, hey, actually understanding thinking more deeply about your marketplace and your customers is a better winning solution. And there are examples of people who've done that. It's up to the Home Depot and other great retailers to prove that every single day.
I would love to know, knowing the expansion of Home Depot and providing the services, so those third party, the carpet installations,
Right.
All of the things that happen inside your home. So you've talked a lot about inside the store,
Right.
customer service is so key. How do you go about making sure that that customer service is the same, knowing that you don't really control the next step of that third party? Because having a husband who is Mr. DIY, and having the saying every Saturday, I'm going to Home Depot.
Right. Yay.
You control inside, but outside, we've been the beneficiary, both good and bad.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
Okay. So it's a great question that I'm largely going to duck. But I will tell you, so this is, but it does connect with the funny, sort of now in retrospect, funny story. My very first weekend on the job as CEO, I'm in the office, and it's a Saturday afternoon, and I hadn't yet figured out that you don't answer your phone. Phone rings, I pick up the phone, Frank Blake, and it's a customer. And this was such a searing experience. And the customer, we had done a kitchen remodel for this customer. The baseboards had come up at some point, and the customer's cat, at some point, had gone under the baseboard and into the wall. The baseboard went back down. The cat did not get back out. And she discovered that not through a little scratch on the wall, but through the other way that you find that an animal's in your wall. I had so in answer to your question, I had a 2.5-hour conversation with this customer because that was pretty stressful example of sending third parties into the home. I think what's happened over the last, so that's 2007, what's happened over the last decade is through the use of technology, vetting processes, and all the rest, Depot has gotten just better and better and better at providing the third-party services. It will never, it's an important service to provide. The bulk of the sales will still be store sales, but technology now provides the company with an opportunity to be as present with the consumer as you know, your local neighborhood shop. And I think that that's the path that the company's on, and I think you know, if I look at the results, they're doing better and better and better. Thank you all very much. Thank you for your time.
Frank, let me present to you this sculpture just to remind you of your time
Thank
with
you.
us today. We so appreciate you taking the time and the gift of all of your wisdom and experiences and leadership. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks very much.
We would love to pay for your parking, and so if your parking has not been validated on the way out, please stop by the desk and we'll do so. Remember, we will not be here in December, but we'll return back in January. Also, on December 14th, we have our economic outlook. I wish all of you a terrific holiday season and look forward to seeing you hopefully in December and in January. Thank you.